I'm Dr. Pasha from the Pasha Snoring and Sinus Center, and today we're going to talk about something that affects everybody, and that is insomnia, where you have difficulty either maintaining or initiating sleep. So today's we're going to this is going to get into the weeds, guys. We're going to go deep into why people sleep, how you can set yourself up to successful sleep, and how you deal with this very, very difficult problem of sleeping. Especially as you get wiser in your days, as you get older, you become more anxious. We're humans and we get busy in our daily jobs and activities, and it becomes much, much more difficult to fall asleep. So this video, again, it's going to be very detailed. I invite you to take notes. We're going to talk about everything from how to determine whether or not you have enough sleep. We're going to talk about ways that you prepare yourself to sleep. We're going to talk about ways that even during the day, that things that you should do, practices you should do, so that when you go to sleep, when it's nighttime, that your body falls asleep much easier. And last but not least, we're going to spend some time, which is a very popular subject, and that's sleeping aids, including medications and also supplements. And I'm going to go through what I recommend, and I recommend to my patients whenever they have difficulty falling or initiating their sleep. Finally, if I am your doctor and I told you to watch this video, then make sure you follow it to a T. If you are just here as a guest, I advise you that you get your medical advice from your physician and do not take this video as medical advice. So let's go ahead and to get into this. The first thing I want to talk about is just as a basis, understand the importance of sleep. Now, sleep is one of the foundations, one of the pillars of health. When I talk to my patients, I explain the 4 pillars of health is your diet and how you eat. Number 2 is your movement. That includes exercise, endurance training, and flexibility, and strength training. The third thing is make sure that you manage your stress and your anxieties. And fourth is sleep. And if you lose any of those legs of that chair, then you will fall and it will compromise your health. So sleep is very, very important. It's more important than you can ever guess. Sleep is actually despite the fact that we spend 1/3 of our life sleeping, we don't know a lot about sleep as much as we should, rather. But let me tell you, we do know the effects of not sleeping. And any process in your body, where you're dealing with your memory, cardiovascular health, your immune system, cancer risk, you name it, your memory, cognitive functions, dementia, anything that you can think of, if you don't have good enough sleep, then you will compromise your health in any of those ways. Your sleep is so important. When you go to sleep, your body rejuvenates, it revitalizes, it cleans out toxins in your body. It gets your head kind of straight in a ways that we're still starting to understand. It is without a doubt when patients ask me, what's the purpose of sleep? I just say simply everything. It's like saying, what's the purpose of eating? And when you compromise it, everything goes down. Just like if you compromise your diet and you don't eat, then everything breaks down. So it is a fundamental part of your health. Now, falling asleep is a universal problem, especially as you get older and wiser in your days. It's not like when you're a baby. I've heard the expression, sleep like a baby. Babies have no problems falling asleep. But as you get older, as you engage in the world and you get married, have kids, have a job, have family to deal with, and different issues come up, sleep becomes much less automatic. So as you get older, as you experience the world, as you deal with your anxieties and different things, you need to think of sleep a little more differently. And you got to think of it more as a ritual, more or less. And you have to prepare for yourself for sleep. It's not often, and maybe you're one of those types that can just go to bed and fall asleep very quickly. But for a lot of us, we have difficulty either initiating or maintaining that sleep. So we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, is how much sleep that you need. Before we even get to insomnia, we have to have a baseline of a magic number. And that magic number is how many hours of sleep do you need at night? And it's not an easy question to answer. And it's not a static number. It's not like the average adult is 8 hours. Well, that's the average. That means if you look at a curve, average is 8. That means there might be people out there that need 10 hours. I have patients that need 11, 12 hours. It's very difficult for them to, survive in this world, but you may require that. And then I have patients that are lucky that need 4 hours of sleep. And we all know people like that, and they're the luckiest people in the world because they get a lot done. But whatever that number is embedded in your genome. That is embedded, and that's you. And we have no method to cheat that. So if you require 8 hours of sleep, there's no medications that's going to get you through that to change that number. There's no surgery, there's no CPAP machine, whatever you're thinking. It is your number, and if you compromise it, that will cost you in your health, especially in the long term. Now, to determine that number, it's actually quite easy. What you do, take a vacation, go to sleep as much of the night, and then you should wake up naturally without an alarm clock and feel great. That is your hours of sleep. As an adult, and I'm even quite honestly as children, but specifically as an adult, if you have a healthy sleep style, once you determine what that number is, that means what amount of sleep is required that when you wake up, you feel, number one, refreshed, and you maintain through the day without being tired, whatever that number may be. If you are leading a healthy sleep style, this is how it should be. You should go to sleep naturally, and then you should wake up without an alarm clock. And it's not like you won't struggle a little bit, but you shouldn't be coming out of that deep sleep where you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. It should feel a little bit of a struggle. You should wake up right before your alarm clock in a very natural way. That is how your body's circadian rhythms and sleep drive is made for, so that you wake up naturally. If you're waking up with an alarm clock and it's, waking out of deep sleep and you feel like, oh my God, I feel like crap, and then you still are sluggish during the morning, and then by noontime, this is not a healthy way of sleeping. You're probably having inadequate amount of sleep, or your sleep quality is poor. In this video, however, we're going to talk about simply dealing with insomnia, the difficulty in maintaining and initiating sleep. So once you have that number, the second thing to do is to go, okay, what are the drivers for me to fall asleep? Well, there's primarily 3 drivers that determine whether or not you're going to be sleepy. One is this neurotransmitter in your body, in your brain, that's called adenosine. This is called your sleep drive, and it's very easy to understand because adenosine accumulates as you are awake. So when you first wake up, you have very little adenosine in a certain portion of your brain, and then as you stay awake, that adenosine builds up, and you become more and more sleepy. And we know this, and you may not know this without knowing it, but when you take caffeine, when you take coffee, that actually blocks the effects of adenosine, and that's how caffeine and coffee work. If you're going through your day and you're building up your sleep drive, and then you decide to take a nap, well, the problem with taking a nap, and I'm not going to say that naps are unhealthy, we're going to get to that, but if you take a nap, that drops that adenosine, and then the adenosine doesn't go high enough to accumulate in your brain that would stimulate for you to be eventually sleepy. So the idea is very simple. The longer you stay awake, the more sleepy you are. Very simple concept. The second thing is your circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms are something that it is your clock in your brain that sets the tone at every 24, it's a little slightly over 24 hours, 24.2 hours to be exact, that sets your brain to tell you it is time to sleep. It is time to wake up. And that clock is actually synced to light. And it makes sense because, from an evolutionary developmental standpoint, you want to be awake during the light time, during the day, and you want to go to sleep at night. Now, that becomes very important from a practical standpoint because while you're awake, we're going to talk about this, especially when you wake up, you want to see that light. Because what that light does is it drives that circadian rhythm much, much more deeper so that when you're awake, those hormones, specifically melatonin, that we'll talk about that later when we talk about supplements. As you wake up and you get that natural light, and that natural light is very important, it stimulates the back of your eye, and then it goes through these nerves to right on top of your brain, to close to your pituitary, and then your body suppresses the amount of melatonin that is secreted naturally. So during the light time, you have less melatonin in your body, and then you stay awake, and your body's telling you, your time clock is telling you you should be awake. Then after a certain period of time, 12 hours later, then what happens is as the sun goes down, you get less light. Then your natural body rhythm clock tells you that it's time to go to sleep, and you start to secrete melatonin, and that gives all your cells the cue that it's time to sleep. So that's called your circadian rhythm, and those are synced to a clock that's embedded in every cell in your body. The third thing is core temperature. Right before you go to sleep, what happens, your body gives a very interesting signal. I mean, one signal is hormones, but another way to get to your body is just change your body temperature. And as your body temperature slightly cools, almost like a bear hibernating, that's how I think about it, that also stimulates sleep. And right before you wake up, your body starts to warm. And that's how some of these things that you see on TV about these blanket coolers that automatically adjust your temperature, and how important it is to be slightly cool in your room. These are all very practical ways to manage sleep. So the three things that initiate your sleep: one is just your natural circadian rhythms that's synced to light. Number two is your sleep drive, which is derived by adenosine, which accumulates in your brain. As you stay awake, it gets more and more higher in your brain, and that causes you to go to sleep. And third is the slight cooling of your body. Those are the three things that makes you want to fall asleep. So let's now talk about how you set up a ritual to fall asleep, given what you've known just so far. So number one is make sure you set yourself up with certain times you go to sleep and you wake up. I'm telling you, if you are one of those people, and we're all guilty of that, where sometimes you sleep at 9 o'clock and then the next time you maybe have a late night, you go to bed at 1 or 2 a.m. These things are ways that we conduct ourselves socially, but it's not healthy. And even worse than that is shift working. The importance of setting a sleep schedule is so important and natural because of our circadian rhythms. Once you start messing with that, your body does not adjust too well in shifting sleep schedules. So the first thing to do is, if you can, if it's practical, at least try to go to bed at within plus or minus of 1 or 2 hours. So set your sleep time, make sure that you're getting adequate, whatever that number is, whether it's an average 8 hours to start out with, or you have to extend out 9 or 7, have a set sleep time. The second thing is, again, as you get older, you've got to think of a ritual on what works for you and how to set up your sleep. One thing people like to do is they take a shower, and showers are nice because as you get out of the shower, of a hot shower, your body starts to cool, and that starts to initiate that sleep temperature differential that causes your body to feel like it needs to sleep. The other thing is to prepare your room. A lot of us today, we're all guilty of that. We take a lot of things to our bed. Our bed is a temple. It should act like a temple, and it's only two purposes. One is intimacy, and the other one is sleep. If you're using your bed to check your emails on your computer, or you're flipping and scrolling through your phone, and then you're watching TV, and you've got your kids and maybe a couple pets in your bed, this is not how it works. You need to prepare your bed so that when your mind connects to your bed, you fall asleep. So take everything out of your room, get rid of your phone, turn the lights off, because again, you want that light to be off so you're not getting stimulated. And believe me, even the light specifically from your phone, that light that's emitted from your phone is stimulating the back of your eyes and preventing yourself from having melatonin, which derives your circadian rhythms. So all these things become very, very important. It is not easy, especially in this today and age, but you need to keep that bed sacred so you make that connection. And let me give you another way to think about it. Many of us, when we get home, as soon as we see that couch, we lay down, we fall asleep in 2 seconds. But if, God forbid, you get us on our bed at the time that we're supposed to sleep, it becomes very difficult. And that's because when you come home and you relax and you're tired and you sleep and you got the TV, you have no pressure to sleep, your brain connects to that couch as your sacred spot. You need to make that couch your bed. And to do that, you've got to set that stage up. So it's important. These are called sleep hygiene techniques. Okay, these are things that we should all be doing all the time. Prepare your bed, prepare your room, prepare your head. This is also time for you to start to wind down. You can't just jump in your bed like we used to, especially as you get older. You got to start to wind down. And what happens a lot is you take your world's problems into your sleep and you start to use that time as you sleep to get things done. And that's not what's supposed to happen. So one exercise I invite, especially for those people like all of us, it's called psychophysiological insomnia, where you fall asleep and then you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep. Probably one of the most common causes of insomnia. One method to do that is I tell my patients right before you go to sleep, if you have a bed partner, talk to your bed partner and tell them your world's problems. They don't even have to respond. It's just the action of telling them, look, I'm worried about work, I've got patients to see tomorrow, I've got surgery tomorrow, or I've got a big case tomorrow. I just tell your bed partner, they don't have to respond, but that action of getting it out of your brain actually works. Some people take a diary to write things down that they're worried about. But what you don't want you to do, you don't want to bring that angst into your sleep, because you will dream and ruminate about it all night and then wake up in the middle of the night and that's going to be consuming you. So you have to learn how to take your mind, slow down your brain. If you do yoga, great time to do it. If you're a meditator, great time to do it. But develop tools in order to slow your brain down. So once you prepare for sleep and you're in bed, if you find that when you go to sleep, you can't fall asleep, you're waiting 10, 15, 20 minutes, what I would do is I recommend getting out of bed, and it's okay. What you do is you get out of bed and you go and do honestly whatever you want to do. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to sit in your bed and ruminate. So go downstairs, go to your family room, watch TV if you want, read a book, listen to music, whatever it is, and wait until you get that sleep drive where you can taste the feeling of that you're ready to fall asleep. At that point, you go back to bed. Now, what that does, you need to still maintain those hours of sleep that you promised yourself to be in that sleep schedule. So suppose your bedtime's from 10, waking up at 6, you go to bed at 10 o'clock, you can't fall asleep, you go downstairs, you watch TV, read a book, you come back, you feel tired, it's around 11:30, you cut about an hour and a half of your sleep schedule, that's fine. But you still got to be disciplined, you still wake up at your same time, and then once the next day comes up, you're going to be a little bit more tired, and then your adenosine is going to build up a little bit higher, and hopefully you'll be able to sleep a little bit quicker. So that's very important. And by the way, this is the same thing that you should do if you wake up in the middle of the night. If you wake up 2 a.m., your mind's racing, you're stressed about waking up, instead of sitting there ruminating for an hour, it's better get out of bed, go do something else, get your mind to wind down a little bit, slow it down, take a half an hour if you have to, versus an hour of just sitting there spinning in the bed. Once you're ready to go back to sleep, go back to bed. Same thing though, you still got to wake up at your designated wake up time. Allow yourself to be a little bit tired so the next time you get deeper into better sleep. Okay. Once you wake up, again, you should wake up without an alarm clock. That's your goal. Your alarm clock should be there in order to save you in case you oversleep. It shouldn't be the initiation of waking up. Now, in the beginning, it will be. And as you train yourself and realize that your sleep schedule and your circadian rhythms are set up in a way that it's all natural, that's going to be ideal. Now, if you fall asleep at 10 o'clock and you have no problems initiating and maintaining sleep, and you set your alarm clock for, let's say, 6 o'clock, and you wake up and you feel terrible, you're in deep sleep, you're dreaming, and you pull out of it, you're probably shortening yourself up a little bit. And if that's the case, then lengthen your time. If you wake up and you're sitting there and you're spinning your wheels and you wake up at 5 o'clock instead and you're wide awake, then fine, get out of bed and start your day. And then you may be able to either sleep later or shorten the amount of sleep that is required. Okay, now let's talk about what you do during the day. When you wake up, in order to set yourself up for success so that when you go to sleep, you're ready to go. The first thing is something that is we alluded to earlier, and that's light therapy. It is so important. It makes so much sense that you get not only light, but you get natural light. So there's a lot of movement right now. You see a lot of videos and talks about first thing you should do is go outside and spend 10, 15 minutes in the sun. And that's fine. That's one way to do it if you have the time, by all means. But it is important that you wake up with bright lights. I mean, it doesn't have to flash as soon as you get on. It can be gradual, just like the sun. The sun's a good example of that. It doesn't just pop up. It comes out slowly. But that UV light, specifically those frequencies of lights in the sun, is the best way. Much more better than the unnatural lights that we have, specifically with those fluorescent bulbs, which quite honestly can be even more detrimental to your sleep than you know. And this becomes very, very important because the sunlight itself suppresses the circadian, the melatonin, and also secretes different types of hormones, specifically cortisol and some other things that is much more detailed. I'm not going to get into the different types of neurotransmitters that different to sleep, but understand the take-home point is that light is important. The other thing is that some people like to exercise in the morning. Some people like to exercise later on to the day. That's fine. Either way is fine. Exercise is something that I will never ever say, that it should ever be a limiting factor. Should be when you should do it. The fact that you're exercising in itself is ideal. However, if you're concerned about when to exercise, I recommend if you want to do it in the morning, that's fine. In the mid-after day is fine. One thing that I would avoid doing is doing high strenuous exercise right before you go to sleep. The reason is that you're revving up your body temperature, and at that point, if your body temperature becomes too high, it goes against that core body temperature that needs to cool down to initiate sleep. If you want to exercise, you can do it in the evening, but allow yourself an hour or two to kind of relax and cool down. And again, that shower will help also. Caffeine, coffee. I get oftentimes asked by patients, should I be stopping caffeine, coffee? Look, I'm not going to tell you that you can't have your midday coffee or your morning coffee or even your midday coffee. And I'm not going to demonize those coffee drinkers and people that require caffeine. I do recommend, however, that after about 2 or 3 o'clock that you avoid all caffeine because that caffeine can extend, and obviously because of reasons we explained that it suppresses that sleep drive, that adenosine. We don't want you taking coffee late at night or in the afternoon or in the evening. Breakfast, I often get questions about breakfast. I am not a breakfast guy. I do a lot of intermittent fasting. I have a lot of strong opinions about breakfast. A lot of breakfast that I see that people eat are not breakfast. It's especially with kids. I see a lot of carbs and a lot of sugars that are being consumed. However, I'm not going to tell you that you should skip breakfast at the same time. But if out of all the things that determine your quality of sleep, I don't think that breakfast is a big one. When you add when you do eat, it does shunt the bloodstream away from your brain and the external extremities and into your stomach. So you may get that kind of sleepiness that's associated with it. But that's up to you. I'm not a big breakfast guy anyways. Midday then, as you go through the day, I already told you about napping. At this point, if you're just now trying to get a hold of your sleep, do not nap. Napping is, however, okay if one, you're sleep deprived. You've got a family and a job, and you go back to sleep late, and you got to wake up. If you can nap, napping is not bad. There's a reason you nap. Try to keep your nap within an hour. The other thing is, as you get wiser in your days, as you get older, it is natural for you to fall asleep midday. Matter of fact, when you're younger, you fall asleep early and you wake up earlier, and then as you get older, you sleep later, you wake up later. As you get into your advanced age, it goes back to like your kid where you go to sleep a little bit earlier, you wake up a little bit earlier, and you're allowed to have a midday nap. So if you're beyond the age of 50s and your 60s, and you feel that despite adequate sleep, you do pretty well in the morning, but then the midday you fall asleep, it's okay to take a half an hour, 45 minutes, or even an hour nap. Just keep it short. Don't keep it in the midday. Don't take it too late. And keep it and utilize your naps only if you think you need so. The next thing I want to talk about is the different types of insomnia types, because that's going to be very important in how you kind of remedy your problems that you have with sleep. The first by far is psychophysiological insomnia. Everybody gets psychological, physiological insomnia, and that simply is a problem where you have problems initiating your sleep because your mind does it either races or you have the anxiety of falling asleep. The typical person that has this type of disorder will fall asleep okay and then maybe wake up again and then fall asleep, and then around 1 or 2 a.m. you have this middle of the night awakening. It becomes very, very difficult to sleep. This is typically caused with the cause of this type of problem is very common from people who are very busy, the type A personalities, the type of people that can't get their mind to slow down, the people that are anxious, and all of us have at least a little bit of that in us. And I invite for you as a remedy is those techniques where I told you different things in order to slow your mind down, talking to your bed partner about your life's problems, writing it down before you go into sleep, meditation, yoga. It starts with that. It starts by putting your head in the right space. The second thing is, regardless, you're going to have your bad days. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you find yourself ruminating about life's problems and you can't fall asleep and you're anxious about the morning and you're thinking about work, get out of bed. Allow yourself some time to kind of relax. Don't sit there and ruminate in your bed. Go down, grab a bite to eat if you have to, watch TV, whatever it is. But slow your mind down. Allow yourself to get sleepy. Allow your mind to slow down and then go back to your bed. Psychological, physiological insomnia for the long term. If this is something that you're having on a day-by-day basis, I invite you to seek therapy from a counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, best friend, whoever. But you need to get your head in a better space. That's really the underlying cause of this type of insomnia, which affects all of us. The second one that I like to talk about that comes up in my clinic quite a bit is called circadian rhythm disorders. And there are primarily two types. There's the type where you fall asleep too early. This is actually less of a problem, but it's more common in the elderly. And then the more common type that I see is called the delayed type. This is common in teenagers, of course, where they fall asleep very late at night and they wake up really late at night. And it's just a shift. It's just instead of falling asleep at the idealized time that works according to our lifestyles, you either fall asleep at 2 o'clock and want to wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning or even later, or even rarer when you have like an early phase shift, you fall asleep 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but it doesn't work with your lifestyle change. These things are managed a little bit differently. This is just moving that circadian rhythms back and forth. And how we deal with this is with light therapy and melatonin. I'm one of those people that I don't normally recommend melatonin, even though it's out there and I know people have success with it. It is a hormone. If you have this type of problem, specifically with the latter type where you fall asleep later at night and you wake up later at night, this is something when I start to use melatonin to kind of shift that forward a little bit. And the therapy is very simple. Is you right before you go to bed at whatever designated time, you take some melatonin. Use the same techniques that I always do for everything else, your sleep hygiene. If you wake up in the middle of the night, stay awake, everything you have. And then when you wake up in the morning, that's the type of people that light therapy works very nicely. Because that light therapy is what syncs your circadian rhythms so that that you fall asleep and you wake up at the appropriate times. So if you have a delayed type, take melatonin like 20 minutes right before your designated sleep time. When you wake up, go outside, spend a lot of time as much as you can, get that sunlight in the best you possibly can. Other types of insomnias that I see quite a bit that I won't get into too much. Another very common one is associated with mood disorders. And this is obviously that scope is much bigger than this video. But if you either have true-fledged anxiety, true full-fledged major depression, or you have components of anxiety, components of mania or depression, these things have to be addressed in concert with your sleep. So if you have a problem with your mood, you will have a problem with your sleep. And if you have a problem in your sleep, it's going to make your mood worse. So if you're an anxious person and you're an insomniac at the same time, you become more anxious. If you're down and depressed and then you fall and you have difficulty with sleep, it's going to worsen your depression. So I invite you, if you have this problem, is attack it in concert. Don't think that by solving your sleep, your mood disorder is going to be gone away. But at the same time, don't think that you're going to be able to tackle your sleep unless you have some control of your mood. Other things that is very common that I see is drugs, particularly patients that smoke and use nicotine. I see all the illicit drugs. These are things, especially these stimulants that people take, including hallucinogens, even some of these over-the-counter power aids that I see. That, for obvious reasons, nicotine and cigarettes and in gums, that will affect your sleep for obvious reasons. I have a lot of patients, a lot of youth that are using different types of stimulants now for their to study for tests. Adderall is a common epidemic. I mention these things that when you self-reflect to see where you're at as far as your sleep is concerned. Don't neglect the fact that taking caffeine is something as mild as taking caffeine, or taking that midday Adderall, how that can kind of bleed into your sleep schedule. Let's now talk about probably the most common questions that I get, and that's how we deal with sleeping pills, whether prescribed and over-the-counter supplements. Now, I'm going to make this very, very simple. I do not prescribe sleeping pills, whether they're benzodiazepines or they're Z drugs, any sedatives for insomnia, unless you have one specific type. I'm going to say that again. And it drives my patient crazy because they don't understand why, and I'm going to explain it to you. By giving a sedative, whether it's Xanax, like a benzodiazepine, or Ambien, or all the other ones that are out there. These actually are sedatives. They're sleeping aids in the fact that you're going to fall asleep. But number one is that you are affecting your sleep architecture. When you take these type of sleeping pills, you have a normal sleep architecture. You go deep sleep. There's N1, which is you're starting to fall asleep, and then you got this middle of the road sleep called N2, and then you've got this deep delta sleep, N3, which is what gives you all the health benefits. If you get into light sleep and you don't get into the deep sleep, then despite the fact that you may have get 8 or 9 hours, if you're not getting that deep sleep, then you're not getting the benefits of sleep. And when you wake up, you don't not only do you feel like crap and you feel unrested and unrefreshed, you're also not getting all the benefits that prevent chronic disease. When you start messing with sleeping pills, they do affect sleep architecture. So your quality of sleep becomes unnatural, and that's an issue. Number two is you're not addressing the underlying cause of why you have the insomnia in the first place. If you're just sedating yourself and you're giving yourself a sleeping pill to cheat, and you become addicted to it, require it, but you're not addressing the underlying cause, and therefore you are not addressing the real reason why you're having problems falling asleep. So for those two reasons, the only time that I ever give any kind of prescription sleeping pills is if you have what's called adjustment insomnia. You had a death in the family, you had some kind of tragedy, or even for those, one or twice a month where, you're having a bad day and you can't sleep and you got to get up in the morning and you have a big presentation or something like that. These are called adjustment insomnia. These are very rare conditions. I prescribe it in protest if my patients ask for it. I give them to them and I explain to them, I do not want you to take this as a daily medication. I do on occasion recommend melatonin, or more importantly, I usually use 5-HTP, which it's a precursor to serotonin and then eventually converts to melatonin. And serotonin, by the way, is another neurotransmitter that helps in regulating sleep. whole different lecture to talk about the different types of neurotransmitters that deal with awakened sleep. But understand that when I use melatonin, I like to use 5-HTP because I like to stay as high up the ladder as you can. So 5-HTP is a precursor so that it becomes more balanced, so that when that melatonin is produced, you get all the other chemistries that are associated with that. So 5-HT and melatonin, I occasionally recommend. I know it's very common, but it is a hormone. And because of that, I don't use that or recommend that routinely, especially on someone that is young. Now, anecdotally, I know that it works on certain patients, and I invite you to use that for a short period of time, specifically if you have that what's called that phase disorder, that circadian rhythm disorder, where you're sleeping too late and you're trying to shift that forward. So if you take that melatonin, that helps with that. But I don't like using melatonin or recommend using melatonin as a chronic medication and take on a daily basis. Okay. My number one go-to right now for sleep that I've had the best results from with my patients, my friends, I take it myself, is magnesium. Magnesium is, it helps in many different ways in slowing your mind. There's magnesium is associated with different types of chemistries. The one that I like to use that is, again, recommended in my research is magnesium threonate. The reason that you have to think about the associated chemistry with that is because you don't want it to stay in the gut. You want it to actually go all the way into the brain and cross what's called the blood-brain barrier. And not all magnesium complexes cross the blood-brain barrier. So I like to use magnesium threonate. Another sort is magnesium glycinate, which is much more common. Threonate you probably have to order online. The other one you can probably get pretty commonly. But it works to slow the mind down. It works with the GABA receptors. These are the negative inhibitory neurotransmitters in the brain. And basically what I like about that, it's not sedating you, but it's slowing your brain down and telling you, hey, listen, it's time to go to sleep. It's used, magnesium threonate, it's in magnesium complexes in general. They're used to help relax. It's been known to possibly help with memory. Just make sure if you have a heart condition that you check with the cardiologist to make sure there's no contraindications with that. And then another thing is it can disrupt the gut. It can cause GI issues because it's often used for constipation. So my go-to is magnesium threonate. I also like to use apigenin. It's and just so you know, magnesium threonate. I recommend about it comes in like 144, 145 milligram sources, and that once about 20 minutes before you go to bed is a good way to deal with. Is a good way to source that. The second one is apigenin. This is it's a flavonoid if you're into chemistry. It's found in tea, and it helps sleep, again, very similarly to magnesium, that has some calming effects and as an inhibitory with the brain. I recommend about 50 milligrams, and you can stack this. Matter of fact, as my starter with my patients, I recommend taking the magnesium threonate, the apigenin 50 milligrams, and then I also supplement that with threonate. And threonate is another amino acid. It's found also in green tea specifically, and it's also, like the rest of them, have this kind of anti-anxiolytic properties that has a calming effect. And I usually use about 200 milligrams to start out with that. So magnesium threonate, get about 144 to 145 milligrams of that. Supplement with apigenin at 50 milligrams, and then threonate at 200 milligrams. And that's kind of like my go-to. And if you go online, you'll see they're often coupled together. And then there's also some, I've seen some compounding companies that have put them all together as one pill. Whatever it is, I have no affiliation with any of these companies, but that's kind of my go-to. I've had some moderate success using GABA directly. Again, GABA is the main inhibitory transmitter in the brain. I usually have them pulse that using about 100 to 300 milligrams or so every third or fourth night. And then Glycine, again, is another one of those amino acids. It's inhibitory, a little bit different than the other ones, is that it works with melatonin. And then that's another one that I would pulse with GABA. And I recommend about 2 grams every 3 to 4 nights, every 3 or 4 evenings. So just to summarize, no recommendations that you're going to get from me for ever using sleeping pills, especially the benzodiazepines, the Valiums and the Xanaxes and stuff like that. If you're taking that for anxiety, that's one thing, but if you're taking for it for sleep, I do not recommend that one bit. If you're going to use supplements, I'm not a big fan of taking melatonin every day, but if you have a sleep circadian rhythm disorder and you want to fall asleep a little bit earlier, you can start that and eventually get off it once you set that stage for that melatonin. Instead of using melatonin, I like using 5-HTP. That's easier to get, and the reason I like that is because it's higher up that food chain, more or less, so that you get a little bit more balanced melatonin distribution. Then if you want, the next stack is I like to use the magnesium threonine, apigenin, theanine combination. You take it about 20 minutes before you go to sleep, and what's nice about that combination, they slow the mind down. It has a calming effect, so that allows you to initiate and maintain your sleep a little bit better. If you do have a little bit of circadian rhythm disorder and you want to supplement the melatonin a little bit, you can consider taking every 3rd or 4th night the glycine GABA combination as your supplements. Okay, guys, we covered a lot today on sleep. We hope you found this information very useful. It's a difficult topic. I didn't want to cheat. Usually my videos are very, very short, but this topic I needed to spend the time because this is so unbelievably important. It affects all of us. If you're one of my patients, please, everything that I say, take notes and take it as a prescription. If you're a guest, thanks for watching. I hope that you found this useful. Thank you very, very much.